Hi, this is Corina, and you're listening to My Family, Harv Roman, on WCGO 1590 AM.
AM 1590 is WCGO Radio in Chicago, where Chicago goes for Celebrity Hotline Conversations on a Saturday morning. It is kind of a deja vu. If you were with us last Saturday morning on the Celebrity Hotline, we had Corina Cat Ayala, and our interview segments last week were a very, very cool conversation in which we talked about just about everything except Corina's freestyle career. Truth of the matter is, when we taped the Celebrity Hotline conversation, we led off by talking about her freestyle career and her days in the music industry and her videos and things like that. But afterwards, like in the second half of the interview, we ended up touching on a lot of socially relevant topics that I thought were more important to put on immediately rather than waiting for this particular Saturday. If you missed last Saturday's edition of Celebrity Conversations with Corina, you want to run to www.wakeupdancing.com after this broadcast and listen to last week's show. A lot of social things, a lot of things that might be taboo subjects everywhere but here. And Corina did a great job in our conversation, and I promised that I would come back this week with some of the freestyle aspects of our conversation, so that's what we're doing. It is an all-new conversation. And this time around, Corina and I are going to catch up a little bit on what she's been doing in terms of the music and the videos and whatnot. So all in all, 2 hours with Corina in the course of 2 weeks. That's pretty good, don't you think? To the Celebrity Hotline we go for somebody whose friendship with myself and the radio stations I've been involved with goes back, all the way back to the late 1980s. Corina, how are you?
How are you?
I am doing well, and I feel pretty good that you ended up sending me a text message maybe a week or so ago asking me if I was interested in doing an updated interview with you. And of course, I'm always interested in talking with you. You're one of those who goes back to my original days at WCYC, but then after I left WCYC and I started doing Club Kids Radio on an AM station. You called in and talked to kids. I think it was in 2008. And now here's a third radio station that I'm on, and you're joining me on that one too. So you've kind of joined me along the way from the 80s through the 90s and now to the new millennium.
Wow, it has been a really long time. And, you know, whether or not, I don't know if I've ever said this to you before, but you're on a really short list of people that I would talk to. First of all, I consider you a friend first. And I don't like doing interviews, and I don't like, most of it has to do with stuff comes up that I just feel like I don't really want to talk about that, and you can't really say that because people don't know the history of things. Also, I like to be very truthful, and you don't really get a lot of opportunity to say what you really think about. Like, people get very nervous about that. So because I can't speak freely, I tend to not do them other than with people that I know I could be myself, you know, and actually say something that might benefit someone who's listening. You know what I mean? And you're just awesome. I mean, I just love talking to you.
Well, I appreciate that I made your short list of approved, not only approved media sources, but friends as well, because I see you in the same light. It's more of a personal friendship than it is a professional radio thing, because we wind up speaking online and offline and on the air and off the air and talk about, you know, regular everyday stuff. Even setting up this interview was kind of like, well, Sunday morning, what are you going to be doing? I'm like, well, I got to do laundry first. And then Corina says, well, I got to do laundry too, and then I got to run some errands. And that's the type of stuff that if you were scheduling interviews for Jimmy Kimmel, for instance, you're probably not saying, well, I got to do laundry and then I got to get back to you.
Yeah, no, it's always so great to talk to you, Harv.
Well, and I appreciate you, and I always will. You're one of those who was there way in the beginning. It was an early morning conversation in the late 80s at the first radio station that I landed at, WCYC, and from that day until now, we've had some really powerful conversations, and you've helped us along the way. I even remember when I was at 1450 AM, and I had a few kids in studio, and you had called in, and one of them had missed an audition for Nothing Like the Holidays with John Leguizamo. And because you had an acting background, I remember asking you to talk to, her name was Fantasia, so talk to Fantasia and give her a little tip on Hollywood. And you said, listen, never miss an audition. And it was so cool because she's looking at me like, oh my God, she's yelling at me.
That's right. There are no small parts, only small actors. That is so true.
No, and you know what? And when that movie finally came out, and we did play it for you kids over at the Boys and Girls Club, and I pointed to the little girl who was singing, I think she started the paranda off, and I told Fantasia, see that? Could have been you. Never miss an audition. So there's life lessons learned passed through from you to me to the kids at the Boys and Girls Club, and of course we always appreciate that, and that makes you real. That's one of the things that I like about you throughout the years. You're very real. You're like a person. You're not necessarily, you know, a celebrity or a personality. You're Corina, and you've always been Corina.
Well, first of all, you know, I got into this business because as a very young person, it was how I escaped whatever was going on in my life. Joy, and I remember that there were artists, most of which were people my mother followed, who I absolutely loved. They were entertainers, full-on entertainers. They could sing, they could dance. You know, in some cases, they had their own TV shows, like Iris Chacon, for example. And, you know, there were people like Cher, and I don't know, my mom was a huge child of Motown. So by the time I came around, she had this incredible collection of music, and so I was a big Motown kid after the fact. And, you know, the way those people affected me, I wanted to be able to affect, you know, children really like that one day. And so that's one of the things that has remained very true about my work. First and foremost is, you know, what am I saying? And I've decided that instead of focusing so much on the message, focus on the truth, because there's always a message in the truth. And it's important, you know, that people are given, when you interact with another human being, and there is honesty, and through my work, if I'm able to convey how I feel about a thing, it's about my truth. And then a person gets to sit there and maybe be exposed to something that they've never thought about, a different idea about something, you know, and it just opens your world up. And so many amazing artists like Raul Julia and Barbara Streisand and all those people, they did that for me. And I could be, I consider myself so blessed to be able to maybe in some small way be that, for children and people in general, but primarily kids who think they want a career in the arts,
Well, you did that for Fantasia back in 2008 when I was just doing Club Kids Radio with a group of kids. But you also did that in essence when you were doing things in the 80s and the 90s, because when we had our conversations back then, some of our conversations would also be directed towards the listeners who at that point were growing up on your music and wanted to follow in your footsteps. And you always talked about all of the moves that you were making and all the things that you were doing and the hard work that it took. So you always seem to have more than just an interview. You're always filled with advice and words of wisdom.
you're very involved with children and educating them, just about everything, work ethic and spirituality. I mean, everything comes through you, and so that coming from you, that means a tremendous amount. Thank you.
One of the things that I've noticed when it comes to the world of music and your roots planted in the freestyle movement, there are times where it seems as if, you've moved on and you've done pop and you've done top 40 stuff, and then sometimes people want to drag an artist such as yourself and label you for a particular style of music. They've kind of forgotten that you've done a lot of progression throughout the years.
Yeah, basically it's really interesting. Like, I was raised in the South Bronx in Harlem, and I grew up listening to pop American music, and the Latin music I listened to at home as a kid was pretty much, as far as I was concerned as a child, it was the music my mother annoyed me with. We always hate our parents' music. Nonetheless, it had a huge effect on me because it was in the air, and it was in our food, and it was in our house. And so it was something that influenced me, whether at the time I knew it or not. I think that all of the music, all of it, especially, when we talk about pop music, at the time when I was a child, pop was primarily like a lot of what I know now to be country songs, that made it on mainstream radio. They were primarily white artists, and there were some black artists, but black artists for the most part pretty much were on their own radio stations, R&B. It was R&B stations. And all of that music influenced me, and I had a sound that was a combination of all that. So when I started singing, trying to sing professionally, and I think that the first time I was actually recording in a recording studio, I may have been 13, and I didn't sound like any of the other kids in the neighborhood. I don't know. It was just different. I had a very Karen Carpenter sound because she was some of the music I focused on the most, and Barbra Streisand. So I had a really good range because I practiced the Barbra. And then I had this really low register because I sang along to Karen Carpenter songs. And then somewhere in the middle was me. And the labels initially just didn't know what to do with me. A few years later, they picked up a young girl who was a little bit older than me at the time. And she went on to sign a deal, and she had the kind of sound that as far as they were concerned, is what I should sound like, and it was Lisa Lisa. Lisa Lisa has a very hometown feel. I mean, God bless her. First of all, she's a friend. She's amazing. She's one of those people that don't ask her a question if you don't want the truth, and that's what I love the most about her. But she was so neighborhood, and I always considered myself neighborhood, and yet I had this thing. I sounded what they called different, and they didn't know what to do with me. And so I wouldn't get signed because I was this Hispanic girl, and they were like, well, do you do Spanish music? No. Well, you don't really sing R&B. Yeah, you sound kind of like mainstream, but mainstream is really pop, and pop is really considered white, and so I don't know what to do with you. I fell into what at the time was called Latin hip-hop because I was running around meeting producers and trying to push my songs on people. And then finally, I met someone who said, hey, try your voice on this song. And I did. And then I said, can I rewrite the song? They said yes, and I did. And boom, next thing I know, I am being labeled a Latin hip-hop artist. And I thought, whatever, that's cool, except that I don't rap in Spanish. 2 years into that, it became freestyle music. They changed it from Latin hip-hop to freestyle because the DJs used to freestyle, instrumental tracks, and then someone would sing on top of them. Cool, not a problem. I didn't realize at the time that what was an amazing and wonderful birth of something that I feel I was very much a part of would later become a box that even a lot of the people that listen to the music almost didn't want to allow you to get out of. The problem with that is that when the people who were running it, or even the fans of it, when they weren't supporting the artist to the 10th power, meaning, these artists were doing other things and putting up shows, and if you don't show up and if you don't support them, they have to find other ways to be artists, other ways to express, and perform. And so when people sort of got off the beaten path and went off, some artists from my generation, I guess, went off to do R&B. Some artists went on to give themselves other names and try to pass themselves as different types of artists, be it, more pop. Other artists did salsa music, Latin music. We were literally just trying to eat and do the thing that we love. And the more we tried to hold on to a time period, the less we ate. And people were calling it selling out. And it was like, no, it's my job. I'm an artist. I love performing. And I'm really just sort of going through a journey to find out who I am.
You know, that's a very profound statement that you're making, because you're absolutely right. As soon as well, I'll call them freestyle, as soon as a freestyle artist went from an independent label to a major label, for instance, even back then and to this day, 2013, the fans would kind of be a little upset, saying, well, wait a minute, why are you leaving freestyle? To the point that when you started doing music that sounded a little bit different than the music of the late 80s, people would get upset because it wasn't freestyle. It was kind of weird that fans were not following you guys as you started to explore other sounds. And to me, it was a shame, because when I was at WCYC, I programmed not only by the music and the sounds, but also by the artists. So no matter what Corina came up with, if it was Spanish, if it was R&B, if it was the so-so deaf stuff, I'm going to put it on anyway, because to me, it was a relationship that you already had with the listeners and with myself. Unfortunately, those hardcore fans wind up backlashing, saying, well, how come we don't hear the Lizette beats anymore? It's crazy the way the fans were back then.
you, it's really interesting because when you think of an artist, you know, for example, like Michael Jackson, okay, who gave us how many decades of music. If you listen to his music from beginning till the very end, he did everything. There are songs that can be categorized as country, there's R&B, there is hard rock, there's absolute bubblegum pop. I mean, there was nothing he didn't do, and it didn't matter what he did. People accepted it because he'd been around forever. He had hit a level of stardom that people just accepted. Well, he's just a star. He can do anything. And with people like myself, my core audience who I'm so indebted to for making the dreams of a little girl come true. I say that every time I've done a show. I thank them because really, truly, it's like it moves me to tears to think that I was a little girl who would, for hours, just sing to myself, make funny faces, and put on costumes and perform for the mirror, which was my audience in my mind. And to one day be actually on stage, still that little girl, and having the mirror disappear, and there's actually people looking back and excited and happy, and in some cases singing my song. So these are people that, as far as I'm concerned, you hold them in a place like you hold your family. They made it possible for me to travel the world and do things that, I probably would have never been able to do otherwise. But with that, I had hoped that I had created enough. I always tried to have a very personal relationship with my fans. And I had always hoped that in that they understood that I was an artist, that my music, if you go on YouTube and you look up my video for Runaway, that is an example of a part of me that is much bigger than the part of me that did freestyle was. Because I dig in deep and I'm talking about something that every time I see the video to this day, it makes me cry. It brings me to tears because it's about something very, very true and honest in my life, And I had always hoped that when my audience, my fans, my friends, saw this, that they would feel and see the truth more so than concern themselves with, well, that's some kind of a pop ballad. I mean, where's the freestyle stuff? You know what I mean? And it's always really, really baffled me. And I finally stopped fighting the fight, and I just said, I'm just going to keep doing work that I love, and people will respond to it. And sometimes I'll learn something from their response, and other times we'll grow together. Like, there's always something good that's come of it. And that's just what I do now. I just do what feels right to me, and I talk about where I'm at the moment, and then people either accept it or they don't.
That is so true, because I remember playing that track on some of my shows when you first came out with it, and then they sit there and say, really, that's Corina? Because they're expecting, what they heard from you, when you were on Cutting Records. Even to the point when you guys go into like ballads and doing something that's a little lower tempo of freestyle, they would still sit there and say, well, here's a freestyle slow jam rather than here's a nice little ballad. It's crazy. Okay, I'm sorry, it's like we completely lost you.
Okay. What they don't know, or what they might know, is that when I was 18 years old and recorded like my first single for Cutting, there was a sound that was happening at the time, which I used to call Minnie Mouse on helium. and I won't, we won't like list any artists because I'm not trying to offend anyone. But my point is, we were all, if there was a hit song and that particular person sounded a certain way, they would manipulate with computers. They would manipulate our voices. They would speed things up so that there was a similarity amongst all of us. And while my voice was a little bit deeper, a little bit lower, we always just kind of blended in together. We didn't all sound exactly the same, but there was definitely something that made it sort of live together really, really well, okay? And what people didn't understand is that something like Runaway, which is more in my natural voice, they would go, wow, you sound so different. Your voice has so matured. And I would just say, well, yes, that might be true, but also there's no manipulation there. That's just me singing. And in order for the tracks to fit in to the idea of the type of music we were doing at the time, it had to be manipulated, and there had to be things done to it so that it could all live very nicely together, you know.
I do want to talk about some of the things that you're up to recently, but I also want to talk about very quickly about when we first spoke, our very first winter, it was 1989, and you were making appearances, and you visited us in studio, and you told us about a movie that had not yet come out with. So it was supposed to be like a big secret. Don't tell anybody, but me and Mark Anthony are in a movie. Eventually, that came out on DVD, and now it's considered one of those cult classics in terms of an East Side Story. Tell me a little bit what you can about that particular one. It was like a secret back then, and even when it got released on DVD, it still seemed like a secret. But to me, it's a classic now because there's so many of those personalities that we all know and love that are in it. Hi, Chihuahua. I'm sorry, your voice is disappeared again.
Oh, really?
Okay, there you are. I don't know why that's happening.
Okay, you know what? Whenever it happens, just cut me off, and I'll start again.
All right, está bien.
Hold on, because I can tell I can kind of tell because you go away. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. All right, so, see, like right now, it sounds like you're not there.
AM 1590 WCGO Radio in Chicago, where Chicago goes for celebrity conversations on a Saturday morning. That is music from Corina. That is Whispers. Before that, we heard Now That You're Gone. We also heard Give Me Back My Heart. And at the top of the hour, Out of Control. Let me apologize now for the state of the phone line of the Celebrity Hotline. Corina, if you recall last week, was at a vacation in a forest somewhere on the East Coast. And I was here in Chicago manning the Celebrity Hotline. And every now and then her voice would drop. And I kind of forgot. My bad. I apologize. I'm sorry. I kind of forgot that there were times during the first part of the interview that we completely lost each other. And so here I am, hitting buttons and turning knobs and pressing stuff, and there's nothing going on. But what else is a good thing about it is that it tells you that it's unedited, it's live as we recorded, and you're getting the words from her as she felt them at the moment. And of course, you're getting my frustration right now as I feel it at the moment because, you kind of want to hear the words and the music of Corina. And for a minute there was nothing. But it is better to do that because some of the artists sometimes they will spend, let's say they spend an hour having a conversation with a radio personality or a TV interview or something like that. Out of that hour, how much of it do you actually hear be used on the radio or on TV? It usually gets edited down, or they turn it into 90-second voice track or something like that. But not I, said the fly. I play everything. If something slips out, of course I'm going to try to delete it because you don't want to hear language that you don't want to hear. But in terms of the words and the music, No. Let's listen to Corina. Let her speak the way she wants to speak. Let her talk about the things that she wants to talk about. Last week, it was a great interview because we talked about everything except her career in freestyle. We talked about the acting stuff and the movie stuff and social issues that not only is the East Coast and the Midwest facing, but the world is facing. And if you missed it, go to www.wakeupdancing.com because it was an incredible interview. And so this Saturday, I went back to the beginning of the interview that we taped a couple of weeks ago, and then we talked about the career. And that's what you wanted to hear, right? Corina's career. What is she up to? What about that video that she did? Stuff that freestyle fans say. Well, we will continue our conversation with Corina. Even if the phone line drops every now and then, it is well worth airing, and that's why we're doing it. So my thanks to Corina, my thanks to Joaquin, my thanks to you for putting up with me on your radio on a Saturday morning, but it is so worth it. We'll be back with more Celebrity Conversations.
Denzel Washington for the Boys and Girls Clubs.
In my hand, I'm holding a 2-inch by 3-inch piece of paper that has changed the lives of millions of young people. It's kept them off drugs, out of gangs, and in school. Now, what could be that powerful and still fit in the palm of my hand? A membership card from the Boys and Girls Clubs. Every day, another 300 kids will join clubs all across the country. That's 300 kids who will be picking up a membership card instead of a gun or a needle or a knife. You know, too many people feel like they can't make a difference, but I'm telling you this. Put this card in the hands of a child, and you will change that child's life. Do that, and you can change the world. It's up to all of us. Support a program that works. The Boys and Girls Clubs, the positive place for kids.
For more information and to find out how you can support the Boys and Girls Clubs, call 1-800-854-CLUB. That's 1-800-854-CLUB.
Wake up. Wake up dancing. Wake up dancing. Wake up dancing. Harv Roman's gonna make you dance. Wake up dancing. Wake up dancing. Wake up dancing. Wake up, Harv Roman's gonna make you dance.
That's me right here, 1590 AM and also 1590WCGO.com as the live stream and as the podcast. www.wakeupdancing.com. We got to do a scroll call, right? Throughout the week, I hear from so many of you, and I hear from some of you guys who are online right now, like Kayla and Juan and Sweets and Monica and Brenda Lees and Zulma, Clyde. But then there are people during the week that check in, and I feel like, you know what, we need to say their name because it's only going to take a few seconds, and people like to hear their name. So throughout the week, Annalise and Reese and Chanel, Alejandrina, Sonia, Kayla, Lucas, Carmela, Yolanda, Triana, Ingrid, Cheryl, Mary, Nina, Juan, Ryan, Yesenia, Blanca, Marta, Madeline, Raquel, Jeanette, Sam, I can read my writing now, Tanya, Juan, and Sonia, and Kathy, and Nadine always checking in, Emily always checking in, Lydia, Anita, Millie, Angie, Martin, Gina, Al, Callie, Lucky Luciano, the comic checked in, Nikki, Zuma, Clyde, Jessica, Chic. Well, Jesus is the real name, but we call him Chic at the Boys and Girls Club for so long. Brenda Lee's, Monica, Maria, Samantha, Sweets. I said Kayla and Juan and Frost already, right? Did I miss anybody? Juan, Sonia, Kathy, Nadine, Yvette, Jimmy, Jennifer, Liz, Emily, Winklet, Yesenia, Michelle, Denise, Niece, Angie, Mike. I think that's everybody. Every Saturday at about this time, we bring to you words. We bring to you music. Sometimes, it's a social thing. Sometimes it's a nonprofit thing. Sometimes it's community figures that we're talking about and talking to and bringing them to you. And then sometimes I go back into my original radio past as a host of a freestyle music and interview show back in the day. I was also program director over at WCYC Radio, which was a original freestyle formatted radio station here in Chicago, and now I'm fortunate enough to have the opportunity to continue to do radio at 1590 AM, and it's not a music thing it's kind of a words thing. It's kind of interviews. It's things that we want to expose you to. And in the case of Corina, she was a freestyle artist. She was a Billboard hit maker, and she went ahead to do some acting, and she's done some producing. She does a one-woman show that I can't wait to see. Hopefully one day she'll be able to do it here in Chicago. And so we did an interview that spanned almost 2 hours. Right now we're in the first hour, but we're playing it in the second week, because last week I wanted so much to play the second hour of our interview. Does that make any sense to you? Sometimes I do talk too much, and sometimes we do need to play music. Here's some more Corina music. When we return, more words from Corina. This is her summertime song. It went Losera, then it went Corina. Just to let you know, her version came out like 97 already. Wow. And that is not the summertime song. So I'm going to stop it right there just to prove how live we are. That's not the summertime song either. Hi, Chihuahua. What happened to Corina's music? I don't want to start taping all over. I'm just going to get ahead and play this so we can get back to the interview. And we'll find the summertime song and play it for you. In the meanwhile, here's some beats in my head, and I'm not even sure what they are. It said summertime on the CD. Live radio, red hot, 1590 AM, WCGO.
Okay. All right, so let's see. It started out called An East Side Story. Actually, it was called An East Side Story, and then they renamed it Street Dreams because there was some issue with West Side Story. And then I think ultimately it was released as East Side Story after all. It was a film. They were looking for a girl who was to be a wannabe singer with a somewhat famous sister who was already in the business, and her two best friends running around trying to get a deal. these were people that were from the barrio for the most part, and some areas in the South Bronx, and we were trying to make it in the music industry, and it was the trials and tribulations of being a teenager and not being necessarily of money, in fact, having no money, and all the problems, that so many of us know about growing up in certain areas, and just family issues, how everybody pretty much can relate to that kind of stuff. So by the time they cast the film, they turned it into a film not just about the girl, but about the three friends who were a band and were trying to get picked up. And it was incredible. It was a low-budget film at the time. They had Danny Rivera as Mark Anthony's father, who was a phenomenal, Latin artist, incredible voice, amazing. It had Iris Chacon as my sister at the time, and she, as at one time was an incredible dancer and singer from when my mother was like a teenager, I guess. Incredible to work with these people. And I don't know, it was a crazy experience because there wasn't a lot of money, and when it was cold, the movie was supposed to be shot in the summer, straight through Indian summer, which would be sometime in September, maybe some of October, and it went into December where it was freezing, but we still had to pretend it was the fall. So all of us had these wicked, pneumonias and horrible colds. But Mark Anthony was an unknown artist at the time who had written a couple of songs for Sapphire. He actually wrote them for himself, and he couldn't get a deal, or no one was picking him up, and someone suggested that he let Sapphire hear them and perhaps she could put them on her album, and that's what happened. He wrote Boy I've Been Told. He wrote something, what is it, On Her Mind? Something's on Her Mind.
Love is on Her Mind.
He wrote 3 songs for her, and they were hits for her, and no one knew who he was. And here we were doing this movie, and I don't know, he's really goofy and funny and very, very sweet. And we did a couple of songs together for the film. And I remember being so frustrated with him because at that point I had been recording probably for about 8 years, meaning I hadn't been a recording artist known to people for that long, but I'd been in the recording studio forever. And he used to yell. We go into, and I remember that I used to turn around and be like, "Can you sing without screaming?" Who knew that this many years later he would just be this unbelievable, amazing talent? Because I love him. I think he's incredible. I'm so proud of him. And when I think about the film, I can absolutely go back to that time period when he used to run around with underwear on his head and it's stuff like he'd run around with. He'd kneel into shoes and walk around like he was a small person. I don't know what they call him today, politically correct. I'm going to say dwarf or a little person. I can't keep up. And he would just, do these dances for us, and I don't know, just crazy. And one of the things, when I watch him in interviews now, he seems so serious and so grown up, which sometimes I laugh at because the person that I knew was never going to grow up. He was just silly.
Well, the funny thing is when you watch that movie now, and even back then, it seemed like a bunch of friends goofing off, having a good time in front of the camera. That's basically what it sounded like. And you're telling me that the whole process was kind of similar to that, where a bunch of friends were goofing around, were having a good time, and all of a sudden, here's a movie.
Oh yeah, no, it was totally like that. First of all, none of us knew what we were doing, and we spent hours and hours and days together, and we would annoy each other. We fought all the time. It was like. It was totally sisters and brothers, and we would fight, and he would try to get me to hook him up with my friends. He had these funny thick glasses at the time, and he was maybe 90 pounds. I don't know what he weighed, but he was so thin, and it's ironic because that he would go on to marry, what is considered one of the most beautiful Latina women, Jennifer Lopez, because at the time he was just like, hook me up with someone, and I would just be like, no, because you're goofy and you're weird, and you have an okay voice. So I just think it's really funny. Yeah, it was definitely a time that I think about sometimes, and every so often somebody brings up the movie, and I'm forced to watch parts of it. I say forced, I can't watch myself doing anything. It makes me feel.
So is this true about any of your roles? If somebody pulled out Frida Kahlo, you would have trouble with that too?
Yeah, it's weird. It's like I always think when I'm looking at it, I know exactly what I was thinking at the time. So if I was having any kind of discomfort about, I don't know, something I was wearing, something that happened to me that day, when I look at myself in a piece of work, I jump right into that body and I remember exactly what was happening. And so if I wasn't having a good time in life, I'm always looking at, did that affect my performance? Did it affect it in a bad way? And I'd like to think that, it colored it in a good way a lot. But there are things I look at, and Out of Control video is one of those things.
De un cielo estrellado, lleno de luna, es verano. Llegó el verano y el calor me hace pensar en ti. I wanna play. I'm looking at the rain outside. Please come and take me for a ride. I really want you to come and take me far away. I want to say, take me to the water. Summertime, maybe we can fall in love. Summertime, donde luce cada noche entre luces y color. Me enamoré de un nuevo amor, es verano, donde sanas inquietudes se convierte en diversión. La magia de un nuevo amor es verano. El atardecer de un bonito día, pajarillos, mariposas, es verano. El anochecer de un cielo estrellado, lleno de luna, qué romántico es verano.
The whole thing, I was so embarrassed that they had me running around the streets of Puerto Rico, and people would stop to stare at me,
Wait,
and it
does
was
it-
such an awkward thing that the whole time, anytime I look at that video, I can see it. I see my face, and I'm thinking, oh my God, can we move on to something else? This is horrible.
Is this Corina in bicycle pants on a beach and there's a horse involved?
Yes! The only time I'm good is when I'm on the horse and I'm not singing or anything. That's the only time, and it's the only time I even looked relaxed. The rest of the time, I don't know if you know, there's one thing where I'm dancing in the street, and I turn around over my shoulder. People think it's so cool because my hair, moves about in slow motion, but I'm looking over my shoulder because I think I'm going to be ran over by the car that's insisting on coming down the street I'm dancing on.
That is hilarious. No, we probably all thought it was planned. To me, that was one of the best videos of all time because it was somebody I knew, and then it was all in different sets. Because back then, some of the videos were somewhat cheesy just because of the budget of the day, and videos were not as well produced as they are now. But you go from being on the street to being on a horse to being in sand, so you were ahead of your time even back then.
I had decided, in truth, and I'm just going to say it, I had decided it was really, really cheesy, everything they were having me do. And I said, there's only one thing that's going to make me even complete this thing, because this is really bad. And we were with some NYU students, the poor things were just learning to even use a camera. It was as low budget can get. It was literally somebody with like their home video camera. That's what it felt like at the time. So, and I said, you know what? How much money do we have left? And I think the budget was something like $5,000. And they had spent most of that on airline tickets. And they said, well, I don't know, we have like $200. I said, $200? Okay, let's go to Luquillo Beach or a beach like it, and let's go to a beach that has horses. And they were like, horses? And they fought me on it. And I was like, well, then I'm not doing any more of the video. Boom, they get me a horse. I said, and it has to be a black horse. And it has to be a small horse. I mean, I was just, I went on and on. They got me a horse, and I swear to God, I think it made all the difference in the world because it's what people talk about. It's kind of like, and I have a similar story about Temptation. It's that chair scene during the break when I'm in the purple cat suit and people are like, holy shit, what were you doing in that chair and all that moving around? And it was the one thing that the people shooting the video, we were in England, they didn't want to do that. They were like, no, let's just have you at the top of the stairs singing a song, kind of like the Express Yourself video with Madonna. And I was like, no, she's already done it. I'm not copying anyone. We need to do this thing. And the president of the label at the time said, let her do it. Just let her do it. We can always not use it if we don't like it. And it's the thing people still talk about today, the purple cat suit on the chair. It's so much so that Cece Peniston went and tried to copy it in her own way in the Keep On Walking video. She's wearing a cat suit and the flower, and she's on a chair sort of sitting and moving around. And she got an award for it, by the way, I should say.
Well, you could have started voguing on the horse. Then you could have been more like Madonna. Hey, talking about your YouTube channel, you have the best YouTube channel. Before we go away for part 2 of the interview, one of my favorite videos that I really didn't know was a part of your repertoire that I ran into and I reposted it on my Facebook was your tribute to what freestyle fans say, and I thought that was so hilarious, and even more so because you are one of those freestyle legends, dance music legends that you were talking about. I'm sorry, your voice is gone again.
Okay, hold on. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, you're good now.
Woke up one morning. I had been watching all these things people do or say or, videos at the time, which were like all over the place. And I don't know. I grabbed it was like 5:30 in the morning. And I went into my closet and I plugged in the camera and I just let it record. And I started to just say things I had heard over the years that I've actually heard a lot. And I was hoping no one would get offended by it. I was really having fun, and I was making fun of myself more than anything, and then I put it in my computer. I cut it up a little bit, and then I called it, I guess, Shit Freestyle Fans Say or something like that. And right. That's totally the experience that I've had, which I think is one of the things that have been so much fun, that people are like, you're my favorite. Oh my God, your song Change on Me is just, it's the #1 freestyle record ever. And I'm like, yeah, that's Cynthia, And I just thought, you know what, it's happened so much that I just thought, instead of feeling bad about it, because, other artists would just come to me and be like, it's so ridiculous. People are always constantly thanking me for your song. And everyone would get so hurt because all of us want to be seen. All of us want to have our identity. And for a while, freestyle was called the faceless music because no one knew what anyone looked like. We just all sort of kind of sounded the same. So I did this thing. And there's that whole thing where someone, I'm in the video, it looks like I'm talking to someone next to me and I'm saying, she's who? I've never heard of her, And they might know my songs, but they don't know my name, or they know my name and they don't know my songs. And that's something that has actually happened, and people loved it. And then there were a couple of people who got their feathers ruffled, and in some cases it was, artists. And I thought, I was so completely taken aback. And I don't apologize for it because there was no malice intended. You know what I mean? I was having a good time, and for the most part, people got the joke.
Well, you would think that it's obvious that it's a tongue-in-cheek video, and it's meant to entertain and inform, and if you really wanted to go out and step on toes, you would have done it. It just looked like you were having a blast doing the video, and when I saw it, I thought it was hilarious.
Well, there you go. I thought it was hilarious, and not as hilarious is the fact that this particular edition of Celebrity Conversations with myself, Harv Roman, and Corina Catayala, every now and then the phone line messed around with our feelings and we lost some words, but I hope that we caught you up. An hour last week, an hour this week. My thanks to Corina, my thanks to Joaquin, my thanks to you, the listener, for putting up with me, the DJ, as it occurred on the Celebrity Hotline. None of this fancy dancy stuff. Is something goofed up, you heard it goof up, and then when we fix it, you heard us fix it. Last week, 1 hour Corina. This week, an entirely different hour of Corina. Go to www.wakeupdancing.com to catch up anything that you may have missed out on. In the meanwhile, one of her big hits. Before we leave, au revoir, adios, sayonara, arrivederci, bon appetit, and enjoy Corina. Thanks again. Talk to you soon. AM 1590 is WCGO.